Hey everyone, this is the first episode of the David Seaman Hour. This is obviously a pilot episode. If the sound is weird or anything else, just blame it on my podcasting inexperience. But without any more apologies, we're just going to jump right into this. Thanks for listening to the David Seaman Hour, and the preferred way to access this is to go to iTunes and search for David Seaman Hour and subscribe over there. That is, I think, the best way to get this on a regular basis, or whatever podcasting app you use. Subscribe to David Seaman Hour through your app. We don't want to create a separate website for this or a separate Twitter account. We just want it to be its own thing, kind of out there, apart from everything else I'm doing, apart from the congressional campaign and my own political reporting and all of that stuff. So I wanted to start off by talking about an article in the New York Times caucus blog the other day, which struck me as being somewhat contrived. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, Obama gets a lift on the trail, and it's a photo of a pizza parlor owner lifting President Obama fully off the ground. He's about like 2 or 3 feet off the ground. Here's the first paragraph. Fort Pierce, Florida. Scott Van Duzer, pizza parlor owner and blood donator, can bench press 350 pounds. So he had no trouble with the 6'1", 176-pound skinny President Obama. Mr. Obama got a huge lift, literally, from the registered Republican during an unscheduled stop at Mr. Van Duzer's Big Apple Pizza and Pasta Italian restaurant here on Sunday. Look at that, President Obama exclaimed after the ebullient pizza shop owner lifted him a good couple of feet off the ground after he walked into the restaurant. Man, are you a power lifter or what? This just reads like something that a PR girl fresh out of college typed up and then sent over to somebody. It doesn't read like reporting. It doesn't read like journalism. And if this was a purely spontaneous incident and the visit was unscheduled, I don't see how the Secret Service allowed the President of the United States to be grabbed and lifted off the ground by what amounts to a total stranger. I don't buy it. I think this was... Well, I don't even know what I think. This strikes me as being phony baloney. I don't know what to make of it. I've seen a lot of articles like this where, especially on Reddit, I've seen a lot of articles where it's like, new day, new thing that makes Obama seem approachable and cool and one of us, and totally ignores the things that his administration has signed into law. But I don't want this to be an anti-Obama podcast. There will be time for that later in future episodes. I just thought I would call that out because it's interesting and I just don't believe it. And the New York Times has really gone downhill. They don't do... I don't know why anybody would subscribe to the New York Times. There's so much good free journalism online and so many good podcasts and so much good YouTube content. And you can access RT America for free on YouTube. You can access The Young Turks for free on YouTube. You can access the Joe Rogan podcast for free on iTunes. So I don't know why anybody would subscribe to the New York Times to get just mediocre reporting like that. That's like, I feel like the lamest, laziest Gawker post does more journalism than that blog post did of Obama being lifted up by the pizza store owner. I want to talk about the FAA. There was a blog post, I think by Seth Godin a while ago, the marketing guru, or maybe it was, it might have been a TED Talk or something, but it was either Seth Godin in a blog post or on a TED Talk. He talked about how, like, they announce the seatbelt thing before the airplane takes off every time, and they have this set procedure and a set script they have to read. And he talked about how this is... let me find the actual blog post. That's the benefit of doing a podcast. Let's see, Seth Godin, airplane seatbelts. Okay, here we go. This is from sethgodin.typepad.com, which is his official blog. Understanding stuck. Is there a human being alive who is capable of getting to an airplane who doesn't know how to buckle his seatbelt? Given that we have 100% seatbelt understanding among the flying population, why do flight attendants repeat the instructions literally millions of times a year, low and flat across the waist, ... It's stuck. Like so many policies, beliefs, and procedures in our organizations, this is a ritual that's stuck. To get unstuck, organizations need two things. A vacuum, and B, a willingness to ignore dissent. Change gets made by people who care, who have some sort of authority and are willing to take responsibility. Often, though, finding all three is tough, particularly when faced with the immovable object of the stuck organization. One approach to getting unstuck is the clean sheet of paper. Dictate that the speech before flight is going to change, that the menu will be redone, that the qualifications are going to start over from zero. Okay, so the FAA guidelines are totally ridiculous. They need to be updated for the year 2012. In the year 2012, I don't believe there is a single air traveler who doesn't understand how to put on a seatbelt. The seatbelts are quite generic. It's just a buckle. It's the same as any seatbelt on any transportation vehicle anywhere in the world. A 5-year-old can figure it out. And on the off chance that somebody flying for the first time can't figure out their seatbelt, they can turn to the passenger next to them and say, hey, can you help me with this? And that person can explain it to them a lot quicker than an announcement before every flight. And if we were to do away with that stupid announcement, I feel like there would be less airplanes on the ground, and our air travel system would be more efficient. Because if you're even shaving 30 seconds or a minute off of each flight, that adds up. Also, the no smoking sign on airplanes. It amazes me that in the year 2012 we still have those. What person out there believes it's okay to light up a cigarette when you're in a pressurized cabin that is recycling the same air over and over again, that is moving at about 520 miles an hour, 5 or 6 miles above the surface of the earth? People know not to smoke on flights at this point. You don't need to waste money on those light-up placards that say no smoking. We really need to update air travel, and it's an example of how government bureaucracy is not our friend. Government bureaucracy is like molasses. It sticks to things, and it slows things down, and if you're not careful, people just do the same thing over and over again, and they don't even know why, because somebody wrote it down 30 years ago when it did make sense to say no smoking on an airplane, and now we still have to do it, even though it's totally a cultural anachronism. So I don't know where I was going with this. Oh yeah, so I flew Virgin America for the first time recently, and they were like an example of everything, how to run a business properly. It was so amazing to see this. Instead of having an airline attendant, a stewardess, whatever you call them, a flight attendant, there we go. Instead of having a flight attendant give off that droll speech about locking your seatbelt in and having the seat upright for, the 1,000th time in her career, instead of having somebody do that, they had a funny little cartoon that does it, that gets all of the information out there, and does it quickly, and does it in a way that I thought was actually clever. And I don't even like cartoons, but I thought it was very clever and cute. So that's just an example of how even if you're given bad rules and bad regulations, if you're a smart business, you can make the most of it. And Virgin America in general seems like a company that gets it. Their people were very friendly, which makes such a big difference because otherwise all airlines are pretty much the same. They all use the same couple of aircraft. The airplanes all move at the same speed and get you there at the same time. So it really comes down to customer service and the in-flight experience. What kind of movies are available? Do you get free music? Do they serve alcohol? And if so, is it just Bud Light or is it actually good stuff? So I think, I don't know what my point was, just fly Virgin America. They're not a sponsor or anything, but I was very impressed with that. And I feel like we need to ensure that businesses thrive. When a company does the right thing, we all need to rally behind that company and show the rest of that, whatever that industry is, in this case the airline industry, hey, these guys are doing something right, and we're going to go give them our business unless you start picking up the same kind of beliefs and the same kind of staff. I wish I could pause this and come back to it later. I'm sure there's a way to do that, but we're gonna plow right through this. Abby Martin's new show on RT America is definitely worth checking out. It's youtube.com. Let me just make sure I got this right. youtube.com/breaking the set. And it's her show that airs at 6 p.m. on weekdays on RT America and also on YouTube. It's so refreshing to see a TV anchor who isn't afraid to challenge the status quo and is a journalist first and anchor second, instead of these people who are basically just news readers and they just do and say exactly as they're told. People like that are more like actors than journalists. Not that there's anything wrong with being an actor. I just don't think that actors should be the one delivering important news to the country. I feel like I really suck at podcasts. Like, this is such a weird format. I'm just talking to myself. Definitely in the near future, I'm going to have guests on. I have a lot of interesting friends. I have friends who are dating coaches, friends who are financiers, friends who are unemployed and sit on the couch all day. Just a nice mix of people, and I think it'd be cool to get all these different voices on the podcast. Let's see what we're up to right now. I don't even know what this thing's doing. I don't understand this at all. I don't even know if this is recording. Let's go to Twitter. Oh, so I asked, should I do a podcast? And so many people responded saying yes, so many of you guys, that that's why I jumped on this thing right away. It was just a huge response. And nobody told me don't do it. I mean, if a couple of trolls had said, no, we don't want to hear you, don't even think about it, that wouldn't have dissuaded me because the overwhelming majority of people said you should definitely do this. Yes, please, podcast is the way to go. That's what Merlin Jones said. Do a podcast, love you on Rogan's, says Kyle. Sweet, very interested in what you have to say. It's from Occupy Carlisle. You should, after you make a few videos and YT, YouTube, trust you. Okay, moving on. You guys should all follow Glenn Greenwald, who is now a columnist at The Guardian. He was at Salon.com before that. Yeah, here's his little bio on Google. Glenn Greenwald is an American political journalist, lawyer, columnist, blogger, and author who currently writes for The Guardian. Born March 6, 1967. Books, A Tragic Legacy, How Would a Patriot Act, Education, George Washington University, New York University School of Law. Isn't that weird how Google does that thing now where you just type in somebody's name and their bio just pops up right there? Glenn Greenwald is an amazing journalist. I think everybody should read every single word he posts on The Guardian's website. He's doing the kind of journalism that almost nobody else is, and it's extremely mainstream, extremely important journalism. Journalism used to be about challenging the status quo, being a check to power and abuse of power, and it used to be, it used to be the real thing, and now it's not. Now most journalists out there, most people leaving journalism school would be thrilled to get a job working in the TMZ room, laughing to stupid jokes about celebrities getting DUIs. And that's really sad because a democracy doesn't function without a vibrant free press. One of his articles recently, okay, so he is the one who did the article about CNN. Why didn't CNN's international arm air its own documentary on Bahrain's Arab Spring repression? A former CNN correspondent defies threats from her former employer to speak out about self-censorship at the network. That was a really powerful piece. Another one he's done recently, Obama's Justice Department grants final immunity to Bush's CIA torturers. By closing 2 cases of detainees tortured to death, Obama has put the U.S. beyond any accountability under the rule of law. And that's something I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this podcast, is how the U.S. and some other governments seem to be no longer following the rule of law. It's like they're just doing whatever they want, and they're not following their constitutional mandate. So it leaves you to wonder, is that a form of tyranny? They're using taxpayer dollars to do things that are not in the Constitution, and that the American people have not approved of in any way, shape, or form. I'm trying to find one more article by him that I recommend. Where are you? Okay. Vote Obama if you want a centrist Republican for U.S. president. It's another good piece by him. But it's still not the one I'm looking for. Here we go. Jackpot. All right, so his article published on August 29th in The Guardian. Just go ahead and Google Glenn Greenwald, Guardian, August 29th. Correspondence and collusion between the New York Times and the CIA. Mark Mazzetti's emails with the CIA expose the degradation of journalism that has lost the imperative to be a check to power. Here's the basic gist of the article. CIA spokeswoman Marie Harf told New York Times national security reporter Mark Mazzetti to, quote, keep me posted, end quote, about a forthcoming Maureen Dowd column. He obliged. It's a good article, and it has the actual emails between these two people. But the basic problem here is you have a national security reporter at the New York Times, a guy who has a lot of influence over national public perception and the media narrative. And this is a guy who, based on these emails that Glenn Greenwald published, seems like he's operating more like a timid PR guy than a reporter at a major American newspaper. And look, I got no beef with the CIA. In fact, what their spokeswoman did is pretty typical of a PR woman at any company or organization in the world. When I was a reporter, you always get pushback and requests from PR people. That's a part of the job. The problem is that their reporter was not acting like a reporter. When she asked for that information, he should have told her to get lost. And that's where the conversation should have ended. So it does show, as that article claims, it shows a level of collusion between the CIA and the New York Times that I think is troubling. And again, this isn't really the CIA's fault. They're allowed to have PR people, and every organization in the world, especially every big government agency, has PR people. But you should be hiring reporters who have the balls and the brains and the common sense to know when you're crossing that line between journalism and just kissing somebody's ass, which seems like the latter is what happened in this case. Other stuff going on. Let's do a Google News search for Mitt Romney, because there's something about him earlier today that I wanted to mention here. Oh, here we go. Why does Mitt Romney have to say so many stupid things? Like, all he has to do is attack Obama on his atrocious civil rights record and challenge the notion that people are better off now than they were 4 years ago, because that's just not true. I know a lot of people my age are unemployed, or they're at jobs that pay almost nothing, and they're miserable, and they're up to their eyeballs in debt. And to say that people now are better than they were 4 years ago is ludicrous. Most people are not better. A lot of people have gone into foreclosure. A lot of retired older people have seen their net worth literally be halved, be chopped in half. Now they have to live a lifestyle only half as good as they were expecting to live before. And aside from all of the financial issues, let's put all of that aside for a second, you have less rights now than you did 4 years ago. You have less rights as an American citizen than at almost any other time in American history, except for maybe the Prohibition era and slavery before that. These are troubling times. People don't realize how bad things have gotten. People do not realize the implications of NDAA and the implications of H.R. 347, which Obama also signed into law, which criminalizes certain forms of peaceful protest. The most important kinds, actually, the kinds that actually could influence national politics. To criminalize peaceful protest, to me, is really quite ludicrous. because that's our First Amendment. It's one of the things that our founding fathers realized was absolutely vital to a republic, is a freedom of speech and a freedom of peaceful assembly. But here's the Huffington Post article that came up. Mitt Romney's climate change remarks on Meet the Press outrage environmental activists. Mitt Romney outraged environmental activists on Sunday, telling NBC's David Gregory, quote, "I'm not in this race to slow the rise of the oceans or to heal the planet," end quote. What a douchey thing to say. If you're running for president and you're going to be potentially one of the most powerful people in the Western world, why would you not be interested in slowing the rise of the oceans or healing the planet? We all have to breathe the same air, and we're all on the same land. If the oceans rise and they flood Manhattan and they flood Los Angeles and all these other big American cities, that's bad for everybody. That's the end of our economy. That's the end of our country as we know it, and that's a massive loss of life. So why are you not interested in that? I don't get that. And you're not interested in healing the planet? Well, you should be, because if we get to the point, I read earlier today that coral reefs in the Caribbean are now down to only 8% life. So 92% of the coral reefs, the surface area is just dead. There's only live growth on 8% of it. And it used to be there was live growth on 100% of it. And now, due to tourism, and mostly due to water pollution and climate change, 92% of the Caribbean coral reefs are dead. Just dead rock sitting down there. And if this doesn't bother you, it should, because when you start doing this kind of stuff, it disrupts the food chain. And before you know it, we're not going to have fish to eat. And before you know it, people aren't going to be able to afford meat. And the Earth is a very delicate ecosystem. I think we've come along in such a short amount of time, and our population has expanded so quickly, the Earth hasn't had time to really catch up. And we're not doing the best job of allowing it to do so. And comments like that from Mitt Romney, like, who's he trying to impress there? Who does that win over? Does that win over, like, the dumbest, douchiest, biggest asshole out there? Who goes, oh yeah, cool, a guy who doesn't care about the environment. That's awesome. I think most people, Republican or Democrat, left or right, independent, everybody in between, they care about the future of the Earth. That's where we live. That's where our future generations will be living, is right here on this planet until we figure out a way to get to Mars, which isn't going to happen anytime soon. So weird. I mean, who's he going for? He's going for this just total dick out there, this hypothetical, I'm a real American, I don't care about anything, don't tell me about environmentalism, don't tell me what to do or what to think. Earlier today, there was a guy in a big pickup. I live in South Florida, and it's a place that has a lot of great things going for it. It's also a place that has some scary rednecks. And again, there's nothing wrong with rednecks. The problem are the ones that are scary and that try to intimidate other people. So this guy had a huge pickup truck, and he cut somebody else off and then honked his horn. And his horn, somehow he had this custom build in there. His horn sounded like a freight train horn. It was like 10 times louder than your average vehicle horn, and really did sound like it was pulled off of a freight train and somehow installed in his ridiculously huge truck. And it scared everybody on the road because people thought, freight train? Where's that coming from? And when I see a truck like that that's all maxed out and it has stupid, aggressive bumper stickers on the back, and especially with the freight train horn, I don't know if other people think this. I immediately think micropenis. I think here's a guy who's compensating for something, or he would just be like everybody else. You know, I consider the highways a means to an end. I consider it, how do I get from point A to point B safely and quickly? I'm not there to make a point. I'm not there to work out my psychosexual issues on the road like this guy is. I'm not there to intimidate other people or to start some kind of trouble. If you have issues of that magnitude, you should not be bringing them out on a highway. You should find a fucking therapist, dude. So, don't be that guy with the pickup truck and the freight train horn. It's not cool. Plus, guys like that, where do they get the money? Because the fuel economy of those trucks is so low. And again, I'm not against pickup trucks, especially if you need it for moving things around. I'm against people who buy these trucks and then soup them up and then drive them like assholes purely to intimidate other people on the road. But it doesn't seem cost effective to me because the mileage is not very good, and these trucks are not cheap. and especially customizing them, that has to cost a lot of money. All right, stuff to do. I don't even know where this is so disorganized. I'm sorry, guys. I had a big list of topics and it disappeared off the screen. Let's talk about nightclubs for a second. Uh, I was out fairly recently with a friend of mine, and he pointed out a hot girl, and he wanted me to approach her because, I mean, I've approached so many people, and I've gone out so much that I no longer have that like nervous feeling when I talk to somebody new. I just don't really care. And I've never had a fear of public speaking, which I think is one of the things that's helped me a lot in the past few years. Is I'm not afraid of speaking up because it's just not something I'm afraid of. I definitely have things I'm fearful of, but they're things that most people can't relate to. They're kind of abstract things. I read somewhere that fear of public speaking is for most people, it's one of the things they're most afraid of, right alongside things like death. That to me is crazy. Like every time I get to speak in public or I get to do a TV show or a radio show and talk about important things and spread awareness of things like NDAA, I feel privileged and I don't feel intimidated or stressed. Certainly when you do like a big show for the first time and you want to come across well, but it's not the bad kind of stress where you're nervous. It's the good kind of stress where you just want to make sure you say everything in the limited amount of time you have. But yeah, I don't have the fear of public speaking because I feel like it's just an opportunity to connect with other people. And people are just people. It doesn't matter if you're speaking to 2 people or 5 people or 100,000 people. We're all kind of the same. And once you get to that point where you realize that, it's not that hard to speak to people. But, oh yeah, to go back to the hot girl at this nightclub, a friend of mine wanted me to approach her, and he was so impressed by how hot she looked. And to me, it was really nothing special because I'm at the point where a girl like that, even though she looks great on the outside, I realize there's the very real possibility that there's a petty, dull, and neurotic creature lurking right beneath the surface. And I think we'd be better off as a society if we didn't judge people by the way they look, which we do. Everybody does it. I'm guilty of it. You're probably guilty of it. But I've tried to reduce that as much as possible. Chances are, if you meet somebody who's smiling and has open body language and they're in great shape, chances are they're a good person. And their physical image is congruent with who they are as a person. But at the same time, just because you meet somebody who's overweight or somebody who looks unhappy or somebody who's not wearing a $300 Hugo Boss shirt, that doesn't mean that they're not worth your time. And in fact, one of my first jobs, I worked at a camera store when I was a kid, and we sort of worked on commission. Some of the high-end cameras we would get a kickback on, and so we wanted to sell those cameras. And within the first few weeks, I learned that you cannot judge a customer by how he or she looks, because the person who comes in with the shirt and tie on and they ask all the right questions and seem to know a lot about photography, to be really interested in it, that person wastes your time for 45 minutes, then they buy a roll of film and they leave, and that's it. Meanwhile, while you're in the middle of doing something else, somebody walks into the store 5 minutes before you're about to close, and they've got khaki shorts on and a big tourist T-shirt and flip-flops, and they just flip-flop their fat ass into your store and ask you the dumbest questions ever, and you're like, really? Do you know what a digital camera is? Like, do you know what a lens is? What an SLR is? Do you know anything? And they ask you the dumbest questions about these cameras, and then they're like, okay, I'll take 2, and they buy the most expensive things in the store. And so the point is, you cannot judge somebody by the way they look. If you do, it's just bad. Aside from being a person who's shallow, it's just bad for business. Some of the most powerful people I've ever met I had no idea who they were when I met them. And if I had judged them by the way they looked or the way they talked, I would have probably never, I would have not given my A game. I would have been like, oh, whatever. But you can't do that because you don't know when you're going to meet somebody who's important. So you have to give your A game pretty much all the time. If you're out in public and you're meeting people, you have to assume that every single person is potentially just the person you need to meet at this point in time. And it's kind of a new age way to look, but if you look at things like that, if you look at every interaction you have as this is just the person I need at this moment in time, this is just the person I need to be talking to, it really creates an interesting experience pretty much every time. But yeah, you can't treat a hot girl like she's something amazing, because underneath that physical appearance there might be a really shady, lazy, boring person. And you realize that, like, one of the best ways if you want to get good at approaching women, the best thing to do, I've learned this from some of my friends who do it for a living, is just do it so many times that you don't care anymore. After you've approached and talked to your first 850 attractive women at a loud nightclub, you're no longer intimidated. And that intimidation comes from caveman days, from prehistoric times, where the sexual setup was so much different from the way it is today. Back then, if you approached an attractive woman and she rejected you for some reason, other members of the tribe could see that, and that meant that other women would now find you less attractive, and you might not be able to mate for the rest of the year. You might have just ended your chances of carrying on your genetic line. So every approach mattered. It really did. And on top of that, you could have approached a girl who was already shacked up with the leader of the tribe, and if he found out, he could beat you to death, or he could exile you from the tribe. And again, the end result is you would not be able to carry on your genetic line. But today, we don't live in caves, and approaching a hot girl and talking to her and having an interesting conversation and just not being a creep, just treating her like you'd treat a dude that you're not particularly interested in. When you do that, this is one of the lowest risk activities you can engage in. It's so funny. Guys get sweaty and they get nervous and they start to stutter when they talk to a hot girl. But it is literally one of the lowest risk activities you can engage in. You're not going to get beaten up by her boyfriend if she has one. You're not going to get thrown out of the club for talking to a hot girl. Nothing's going to happen to you. The absolute worst case scenario, if you're being cool and you're having an interesting conversation, is that she might test you or she might blow you off, in which case you find somebody else to talk to. But just driving to the club, driving to the grocery store is a higher risk activity. You have a greater chance of something bad happening to you, of physical injury, than you do when you talk to somebody who's attractive at a nightclub. And that's one of the ways that your brain misleads you. It's telling you something that is now outdated information. And there are so many examples of that. And you have to realize when your brain is providing you with useful information and when your brain is providing you with garbage that was outdated, societally outdated 50,000 years ago, and yet hasn't been updated yet. I'm going to leave you guys with that. Approach lots of hot girls at nightclubs. I think you'll be happier as a result. Or if you're a female listener, I suppose you guys are out there also. Don't be intimidated by guys who are attractive. They're just people. And you want somebody who's attractive and confident and not creepy or needy. I feel like in our culture over the past few years, that's become like the cool thing. Like that show, How I Met Your Mother. The guy, what's his name, Ted or something? The main guy in the show is just a creep. Like, he's needy. He's overly self-deprecating. He doesn't know how to tell a story, because How I Met Your Mother, that story goes on forever. He doesn't know how to self-edit. And yet he's put on TV as an example of, like, okay, here's a good-looking, young, kind of cool guy. And it's like, no, this guy's a sociopath. He's a creep. So don't be like that. I want to recommend you do... Actually, I'm going to save this for the next podcast. Let's leave it here. Let's leave it on a high note. The next podcast is going to be... People have been asking me for book recommendations. So the next one's kind of going to be like an Oprah episode, minus Oprah. and minus bad book recommendations. It's just going to be really good stuff that you should read in your spare time. Thanks for listening. I hope this was successful. Again, the next podcast will be book recommendations and maybe some podcast recommendations also. And the next one, I'll also hopefully have a very interesting guest for you guys, because I do like talking to other people. Talking to myself or just talking into a microphone, it gets old because I already know what I'm going to say. That's one of the great things about human interaction, is that element of surprise. You don't know if somebody's past. You don't know what they're going to say next. So that's why being overly self-involved is a bad thing. Aside from everything else, it's just a boring way to lead your life. Thanks for listening.